Okay, Zach, we're live. Thanks for joining me this evening on my podcast. I'll go ahead and give you the floor if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do and what you're building with Lumara.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Connor. I like what you're doing with the podcast. So, with Lumara, we've really, struck a chord in the tiny home community. It's kind of a surge right now, I think, across the country. And what we do is we do full-on project development for tiny home communities, or whether it's someone getting an individual home or like a whole glamping community for a vacation getaway. So we kind of cover all bases across the country with some exciting projects going on. And it's been exciting, startup life. You never know
And
what the next day is going to bring.
yeah, and so do you have a background in real estate, or I'm curious how you kind of ended up in that tiny home space? Because I mean, I've heard about it a bit. I know it's hot right now, but like,
Mhm.
were you in more traditional real estate and now you've kind of pivoted, or how did you end up in the space?
I've had a passion for it, going back forever. I got my real estate license in college, but I never really got to utilize it. I worked in banking for a good decade or so, but I just this opportunity presented itself, and in my role as CMO and co-founder, it's a really big focus on marketing, but execution as well. But it kind of evolved. Like, I wouldn't say I've stuck to one career path. It's kind of evolved over time. But yeah, this definitely brought back a passion from going back to childhood, being in real estate, and yeah, I love it.
Very cool. And then I'm curious, you led off saying that you guys help project manage tiny home communities. And so, right, I've heard of tiny homes. I've even like Airbnb'd one. I was actually in Mexico and they had a at this resort where they made tiny homes out of like shipping containers. It was kind of cool in like the wine
Yeah,
region of
exactly.
Mexico. But I'm curious, when you say communities, is it like where people are purchasing these to live full time, and it's kind of like another real estate development where it's just a bunch of single family homes, but it's just tiny homes? Is that what you guys have worked on in the past?
That's part of it, yes. So some are full time. Think of like a mobile home park,
Mm.
but it would be tiny homes instead, and people living there permanently. But then also there's the aspect where more luxury glamping, Airbnb rentals, vacation getaways. So a lot of investors are getting into the space as well, kind of building, buying land, setting up, say, 10, 20, 30 homes and renting them out. It's becoming a very popular thing. And like you said, the container homes are really, really popular right now. They're very, modern, sleek. Um, so the younger crowd definitely tends to gravitate towards those.
And then I'm curious, for like a community where someone wants to live in it full time, are these families that are living in tiny homes, or does it work more if you're single or maybe you're older and you want to downsize? I'm just trying to kind of like wrap my head around people or a family living in tiny homes full time. I think I understand the Airbnb aspect, but is that a goal of yours or kind of part of the vision as well? Is it like you say, hey, I see a decent amount of the population saying, I don't need this big house. I'm going to downsize and live in something like this permanently.
Yeah, I would say it's more so, one or two, maybe a couple living together. Sometimes there's full on families living in these homes. But they can get pretty extravagant as well. When you stack together, two or three containers, you get a pretty big space. So it really just depends in that regard. And then there's also the issue, of course, of homelessness. And these tiny homes are being used around the country in major cities as a solution for some of these homeless crises across the country. um, it's a less expensive housing and a more of a permanent solution than a lot of other options that are on the market.
And can you break that down a little bit more? Like, because I understand that currently, if you want to buy a decent single family home in the United States, I mean, it's pretty cost prohibitive. I mean, pretty high, really high interest rates. Um, can you break down specifically like tiny homes? How much do they typically cost to build? Maybe you could start off with like a simple example and then maybe more of a high end example. And you kind of talked about it where it's like it could be bigger and it could accommodate 3, 4 people. What are you looking at in terms of prices?
Yeah, so for an individual, I would say you could get a pretty nice unit for around 50K or so. And prices, of course, can vary based on add-ons and specifications that, and you get to the more elaborate builds where you stack together a couple of containers, or if it's a wood home, just a bigger space, you might get up to, you know, 150, even up to 200. But in the grand scheme of things, you're looking at the housing market. A lot of times, you get a lot more bang for your buck, even square footage wise, than your traditional residential housing. And then another part of that is, people say you buy a piece of land, you put one of these homes on it. You also have to worry about things like septic, water, electric, foundation. So we help with a lot of that stuff as well, the land prep and zoning, making sure your county or town allows exactly what you want to build. Because a lot of counties and cities are very strict with their zoning and permitting regulations. So you tend to see these more in like off the grid, middle of nowhere type of areas, but bigger cities are becoming more welcoming of these type of homes, which is nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that kind of lends into my next question too. Like what do you typically see where someone is buying and building one of these for their full-time residence, or are they just using it as an add-on to an existing single family home, right? They have a big backyard or they have space to add essentially like I don't know if you would call it this an ADU or something. I know those are
hmm
pretty popular right now as well. Like what's the split of what you're seeing? Are more people doing it as a full-time residence or just like an add-on to an existing house?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's pretty even split. We get a good amount of people inquiring about owning one as a primary residence, but then a lot, especially on the West Coast, a lot of interest in the ADU, accessory dwelling unit, where, like you're saying, you already own a home, but there's space in your backyard. You could use it as a gym, as an office, as an art studio, or rent it out, as an extra income source. So people really get creative with what they want to do with them. But yeah, we certainly see a lot of demand in both cases. And then the really the bigger scenarios are those more community developments that we were talking about, where investors get involved and scoop up several homes. So kind of a split between all of those scenarios.
And then, I mean, it probably varies state to state, region to region. But what is the typical like code or approval process if someone wants to build an ADU or add a tiny home on their property? Are you pretty free to do that, or does it have to be approved by? I would imagine the county you live in. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it's very dependent on your specific address. So your county, city, town, depending where you live, their zoning laws will come into play. I would say most of the time it's not an issue, but we definitely like to, really make sure in most cases where people may have questions like, "Is my land okay?" We'll double check, because the last thing you want to do is build a home, order it, and then you find out, oh, I can't have this here; it's not allowed. But thankfully, the regulations are becoming much more friendly to these type of homes. I think as these governments or these towns are realizing how they're much more cost efficient, and they really see the benefit, especially like the ADU purpose as well.
And is the like the holdup that you're just waiting for it to be approved? Like you said, the government will typically approve it or your county will approve it, whatever county you're in. But is it just getting through the bureaucracy that's kind of the issue and you have to wait a long time for it to be approved, or is it relatively quick to be approved?
We see both cases. A lot of times, there'll actually just be a zoning guidelines online already listed for example, you need your home to be a minimum 400 square feet. It needs to be X amount of feet from the road, things like that. And if we don't have clarity on that, we'll make calls. We'll find out. We'll get that information. But yeah, in some cases, like we're working on a project in the Midwest, and there it's a big project, but they would need to rezone the land, and it would be like a 3 to 4 month process to go through that with their town, and it still doesn't guarantee they're going to get the outcome they want. So, um, you know, it's a it can be a bit of a process on the bigger projects, but I would say usually if you're just getting one home, it's not as much of a hurdle. But if you're going to have like 10 acres and do this huge resort in this
Hmm.
town, and they're like, "What is this?" Then yeah, you may have to present something.
So if I'm understanding correctly, and again, it's probably going to vary by region, but as long as you're following the general zoning guidelines, you could just, like you said, order a tiny home through you. It's shipped to you. You just set it up and run with it. Or is that
Yeah, and
oversimplifying it?
a bit simplifying it, but yeah, that's the gist of it. And in most cases there aren't those issues, so it's just a matter of verifying. But yeah, we handle the design of the home, so your layout, how many square feet, if you want to combine containers, like a 40-foot container and a 20-foot on top of it, a roof deck, like there's a lot you can do. And we try to kind of guide or provide guidance throughout the whole process, because it can be a bit cumbersome when you get involved with a lot of the land prep stuff and things like that. The actual build of the home is probably the simplest part, 'cause that takes anywhere from a month to 2 months usually, depending on the build. And then delivering it, where it's delivered with an insured delivery service, and it's just put onto your land on a foundation that we would help with as well. So um, it can be a simple process, but it can also be complicated if in the certain situation, again, depending on where you live. But yeah, we've had a lot of people are very pleased with these type of homes. Like I was saying, very cost efficient. They're spending maybe a tenth of what they would buy on a regular home, and you have everything you need: a kitchen, bathroom, living area, bedroom, windows, and ideally you're in a beautiful setting in nature. So it has a lot of benefits. It can take some getting used to. If you're used to more of like a residential neighborhood, it might be a little different, but yeah, people love them.
Yeah, and what is the feedback you're getting from people that, someone maybe is new to it, but they say, yeah, I'll buy one of these and I'll try living in it. I mean, do you follow up with people after they've been in there for a year just to see how things are going?
Oh yeah, and we actually still have clients who, they'll um, kind of want us to bring people to tour their units. Like if you want to say, oh, I want to see what one looks like in person, whatever city you're in, we would try to find the closest model. I'm not saying all people who buy are gonna say, oh, open our door to anybody to tour it, but we do have a lot of cool people who, if they own these glamping grounds, they're very welcoming to people who want to take a tour, see what these homes look like, see if it's the right fit for them. Because a lot of times you don't really know until you experience it.
Hmm.
But visually, they're very, very nice looking, very clean, well built. And a lot of times the biggest questions we have is, I want to see it in person. Where can I go? So we try to facilitate that.
And I'm curious, you may not, but do you kind of have like some vision for what housing in the United States is going to look like in the future, right? I think we touched on it a little bit about how, prohibitively expensive a single family home is in the United States now. Do you see this as a trend that's not going away, or, a substantial population portion of the population is going to live in a tiny home in 10 years, or maybe you don't think about it at
Mhm.
that high level, but I'm curious if that's kind of your thought process at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely think that. I think a lot more people are going to be living in these types of homes, and it's not a negative thing. I don't think. While they may be smaller square footage wise, they give you everything you need, and you can really customize them. But just the whole housing market right now in big picture, it's very difficult for a lot of people to buy a standard home, as it may, maybe 20 years ago, it may not have been the case. But a lot of people, either whether it's trying to get approved for financing or they just can't come up with a down payment. So this is more, an affordable way to still have that dream of, that American dream, owning a home, and but a much more manageable way where you don't have to break the bank, you don't have to take out a massive loan. So I definitely see this spreading, and more locations, as we were saying, are becoming more welcoming with their regulations and all of that. So I think all those factors combined, I see it. I'm very bullish on this market for sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking through this a little more. Is one of the issues you run across is the fact that, and I don't know, maybe you can educate me on this a bit, but like if you want to buy a lot, right, or a plot of land, I would imagine that they're typically relatively larger, or they're zoned to be larger for a single family home. And if you wanted to build all these tiny homes on it, the lots would be too big. Or do you have the freedom to customize the lot size to better fit what is a smaller home?
Yeah, I mean, we see a variety. Someone may buy a quarter of an acre and put one home on it, which not that much land. But then you get these bigger projects, and it's 10 acres, and they want to put 50 homes on it. So it's kind of a mix. Or we also get people who want a lot of land but just one home. They just like the whole, kind of having their own garden and farming and all of that, um, agriculturally self-sufficient. So we see really a mixed bag. But yeah, definitely the bigger developments, you see those massive plots of land, usually in, very scenic areas like the Finger Lakes in New York, or, in Texas. We have some beautiful homes we've sold where it's just the nature layout of it is awesome. We're actually working on a project in Hawaii, so there's nothing off limits. But yeah, like me personally, I prefer the whole being in nature aspect of it. Like, I think it's like that off the grid mentality. A lot of people who buy with us, we get that feel with them. Like, a lot of people want to be off the grid and want to be self sufficient, and what comes to mind is they think tiny home, which makes sense. It's a lot easier to manage than constructing a massive, home in the middle of nowhere.
And can we kind of get into, you talked about it a bit, how people are using this as an investment, or they're building tiny home resorts, and kind of what the thesis is behind that? Like, why, as a real estate investor or developer, why would you build a tiny home resort versus a traditional hotel? Is it that, and I'm imagining that there's just less cost up front, but you could still
Mhm.
you could charge more, and therefore there's a higher ROI. Is that part of it, or what's the thought process behind that?
Yeah, exactly. And we see a lot of investors. So a lot will, Airbnb these homes, and say, for example, you make 1 to 150 per night on a rental. A lot of times it's more, but just an example, and you fill it out 75% of the time. In those instances, these investors are paying off their homes in 2 years or less, maybe 3 years. So it's in that sense, it's like you won't see that type of return on a traditional home. Or yeah, like you said, if you're building a hotel, you put a lot more money down. Investors in this case, say you want to do 10 tiny homes, buy some land, you could probably get up and started for 1 to 1.5 million, something like that, and really have a nice project on your hands. Um, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing there, though, I think, is the ROI. And there's also a lot of people use them for different reasons. Like, we have a development where the owner wants to use it for agritourism, like agricultural tourism. So there'd be a farm and all of that on it. We have one where it's someone who wants their employees to stay in these homes because they'd be close to their job, and it'd be easy, to provide housing for them. So there's really many use cases. One of them is they plan to rent them out to mostly travel nurses who, go to their local hospital that's nearby, but then they're out in 2 to 3 months. But it provides like an easy way to get some income and the nurses to stay somewhere close by. So there's really just so many use cases that we see for these going around.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious though. You probably understand the landscape, right? I mean, tiny homes are pretty hot topic right now. I mean, do you ever feel, or maybe you could speak to the competition? Like who else is doing what you do, and if somebody is wants to build a tiny home resort in Joshua Tree or wherever it is, right? And 10 other people have already done that. I mean, is there a fear that there's going to be kind of an oversupply of these types of accommodations and experiences?
I think right now, we're still in that early ramping up stage. There's starting to be more of them, but there's still so much more to go. And as far as differentiating from competitors, where I think we are different, Lumara is we're really full service. So whether it's an individual or investor, from start to finish, we want to help them with the project. That can include finding land, doing the land prep, designing the homes, um, working to get them all constructed, of course, and then delivery, setup, all of that. So, a lot of companies in this space may either just be builders or contractors who do parts of the job. So we try to really be full service, like bespoke, and really um, kind of be that guiding hand for our clients.
And so, yeah, maybe you could help me understand the business model a bit more. So, you guys do not build the tiny homes, but you work with a builder or a manufacturer. I'm not sure what you'd call it in this instance. And so, you're kind of the liaison or the broker almost between the builder and the owner or the investor, and helping them through the entire process. Is that fair?
Yeah, we work with several very reputable builders, and then to do other parts of the project, we'll work with other contractors, real estate agents. It's kind of a network of what needs to be done. You need a team of people. So we try to really coordinate all of those efforts. But yeah, it can be, and again, if you're just getting an ADU on an existing home and there's already setups and everything, it may be a very simple project. But a lot of these projects are very complex. So it just depends in that case. But yeah, we partner. We have a lot of partners, and we really just want what's best for the client when it comes to price, when it comes to the build they want, timing, all of that. So I mean that's really what matters in the end.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to curious about like the revenue model. Do you guys just bill an hourly rate and you say, hey, yeah, happy to help and be a resource for you, but it's just going to take this many hours and therefore this is the cost or the portion we're going to take? Or is there a different way that a different revenue model?
I mean, it can depend on the project. Like in some cases, it may be a percentage of the total project, or depending on the builder we're working with. So it just depends on the project, but we don't have like a set hourly rate or a set fee. But it's there's typically a percentage where, depending on the work we do, of course, like we want to provide value to the client, but um, that can vary based on project.
Gotcha. And I was looking online. Is it just a two-man team currently? And I'm just kind of curious what your guys is the two co-founders, what your goals with the company are. I mean, do you envision growing this and hiring a lot of people, or do you kind of see yourselves staying in the space you are now, where you're more of a boutique, I don't know, consultancy or resource for these types of projects?
Yeah, so it's two co-founders, Raphael and myself. He's the CEO and founder. But yeah, we've recently brought on a lot of analysts, things like experts to look into zoning, to look into like land acquisition. So we also partner with realtors, but within our team, we are hiring as well. And we recently, uh, remodeled the website and developed it more. So we're working on a lot of things to really continue to expand. We definitely have no intention of being boutique. Really, we think we provide a lot of value to the market, so we really want to capitalize on some really good opportunities out there.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Um, I'm curious too. So, do you own a tiny home, or is that a goal of yours? Do you own a traditional single family home? I'm just curious, working in the space, kind of what your thought process is in terms of like where you reside.
Yeah, I used to own a condo in Atlanta, but I'm currently designing a container home for myself. Yes, like it looks pretty sleek. I think it's like a matte black 40-foot container, but it has everything I need. So nothing too extravagant. But I'm looking for some good land, which is very important. You got to find the right land.
So, is that one container, like one shipping container? Is that a 40-foot container?
They're typically either 20-foot or 40-foot, and 8 foot wide, and then 20-foot or 40-foot long.
Gotcha. Okay. So you plan to just use one of those containers, so kind of make something more modest, like a true tiny home, right? If it's just one
Yeah,
container.
but really, one container. I mean, for me, it's plenty. Like, living area, bedroom, kitchen,
Yeah.
bathroom. But then also, what's really cool is you can add a roof deck, which I'm going to do, where you have the full roof open. You go out, walk in these little steps outside, and yeah, you just have great views. You can some people put like little hot tubs up there or grill, whatever. So yeah, you can make a lot out of that space, I think. And of course, you can add things like a deck or whatever, but that's all I need for now. If I grow a family in the future, that could change, but
Yeah.
TBD.
That's a good point. And I'm curious, I don't know if you're willing to share. I'm just curious, like what the all in cost will be for you. I think early in the conversation, something floated around like, $25,000 all in. Is that kind of what you're looking at, or is it going to be a little more if you make
Well,
yours a
like
little
I would
nicer?
say, yeah, the container, like starting out to really get one, fitted out how you would like, I would say a low end would be like 50K. The model I'm looking at, once I have everything added I want, probably closer to 100, and that doesn't include the land. So and of
Yeah.
course, land prices vary based on city, obviously. So that's definitely a factor.
Yeah. I'm just trying to like kind of see if we could figure out like what your all in cost is going to be and then what that breaks down monthly. I mean, I don't know if you say, hey, I'm just going to buy this cash. It's not that much. Or if you're going to take out a loan, which I don't know, maybe you're in for 100 grand on the
Well,
container, 100 grand for the land, just ballpark,
yeah,
right? You're all in for 200
that's a good
grand.
ballpark. Yeah, that's a good
Mm-hmm.
ballpark. Um, and that's another thing is the financing aspect is it's unique with this space because these aren't like traditional mortgages. So we we try to find partners who are avenues where people can go who need financing, but it's still something that's evolving in the space. There is a good provider we contacted recently called 21st Mortgage, I believe. But their specialty is like modular tiny home type of lending. So it's really a niche right now because some people will get like personal loans or construction loans or use credit. There's a lot of different options on that front.
Why is it not a traditional mortgage? Or why could you not qualify for a traditional mortgage on one of these types of homes?
I think it's based on the guidelines as far I don't know if it's the square footage or what, but I mean, that's a great question because if you were to apply for a traditional mortgage on these homes, most would not proceed. So that's a great question. I've wondered the same thing with these banks, like what's the hindrance? Um, but yeah, a lot of people will resort to a personal loan or these newer providers coming out. I think there are going to be some more customized solutions for these type of homes.
And when someone takes out a personal loan or whatever it is with these new providers, is there a disadvantage in terms of interest rate, or could you get a better interest rate on a personal loan than a traditional mortgage?
I mean, that's all, of course, gonna depend on the credit profile and all of that of the person. But as far as the interest rate, uh, I mean, I would guess the assuming everything's the same on both applications, the personal could potentially be lower than current mortgage rates, but it could also be about very similar. So depending on credit score, income, all of that. But it's kind of hard to say.
Gotcha. No, that's interesting though. I guess I didn't realize that you can't qualify for a traditional mortgage if you're purchasing or building a tiny home. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Most won't even have that conversation for some reason. So yeah, that's something we're working on. Finding new financing partners, but also potentially in the future having some sort of in-house solution would be great.
and I'm curious, is your guys' phone like ringing off the hook, or are you having to hunt for leads? Are you like getting overwhelmed with too many people hitting you up and wanting these, or like what's the demand for your services
We
and for tiny homes in general?
Yeah, we have a really good amount of leads, high quality. Like today, we probably had about 10 calls earlier today.
Hmm.
And we get a variety of ways. We'll get DMs, people on our website will contact us, um, commenting on social media, things like that. And we really have a lot of good conversations. And like I was saying, it's a mixed bag. You get a mixture of individuals, investors, you get a mixture of need financing, have cash. It's really across the board in all types of locations. Like we actually had a call in from, I think it was the Virgin Islands. They were wanting to get some tiny homes. So some of these projects, if we pursue them, require some outside the box thinking. Like, oh, we're gonna need to ship these on a boat to
Hmm.
get to the Virgin Islands because we're probably not gonna be able to work with a local builder there. So, but yeah, it's all over the board. But yeah, we have a lot of interest right now, which is really cool, and we're excited about it. We're talking to some great people and have a lot of exciting projects going on.
Yeah, awesome. And so as the CMO, right, is that a lot of your role currently is just driving traffic and interest and leads? Is that the core of what you're doing right now?
That's part of it. Also, socials, of course, which we're continuing to build. What we're going to do is eventually we're going to start going on site to a lot of these projects and really trying to get some really good content so people can see what's going on, what we're delivering. And we have some of that now, but we're going to really expand on it in the build process and all of that. So yeah, content, is very important. Getting leads, but I really think that sort of comes naturally once you develop the rest of your marketing plan, I should say, and that can include the website as well, website design. Make sure information's there that people need to see. Make sure you're easy to be contacted, and then working on things like PR opportunities or partnership opportunities, different things like that. Because it's a ever evolving space, so we um we have a lot of interesting conversations, and yeah, we try to think of unique ways to market ourselves, and but a lot of times, yeah, people discover us, which is nice.
And how are they discovering you? Is it like through SEO, through Google, just searching for tiny home project management services or
A lot is on socials. A little plug right now at Lumara Tiny Homes on
Mhm.
Instagram and X. So a lot is on there. And a lot of times, yes, I think SEO as well. So searching and then finding our site, um, contacting us through there. Facebook is very big, which I didn't expect at first, but it's very popular for people interested in these types of homes and this movement. So that's another thing. Yeah, the social media is huge for us, and it's a good way for people to see what we're offering. Visuals, you can't beat that. So that helps a lot.
Mhm. And I'm just kind of curious. It sounds like you guys are doing really well. Like as you look to the future and like mass adoption of tiny homes in the US or maybe globally, I mean, what's like the biggest hurdle you foresee having to overcome? I mean, is it generally just people's perception, or the general public thinking like, oh no, that's not for me. I would never live in one of those, or I'd never stay in one of those. What do you
Mhm.
view as the biggest hurdle to this really
Yeah,
taking
that's
off?
certainly one. I think a lot of people get over that quickly when budget's a factor, and if someone's set on getting a home and their budget's a factor, they may be willing to settle, or I don't call it settling because I think these are really nice, but less square footage, not your traditional home. So that's definitely a factor. When we spoke about before, the zoning, these local regulators, which I think they're becoming more favorable to this movement. And even internationally, we've had some contact with builders who are, it's sparking up internationally as well, which is really cool. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see much that could slow it down right now, unless pending like no new legislation or something. I really think it's a full steam movement, especially with the overall real estate market as it is right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know what you foresee in the future, but I mean, if these are tiny homes are like as ubiquitous as normal single family homes, but I think if the
Yeah, I mean,
pricing
it'll be
continues,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, how it plays out, like the number of tiny homes versus number of traditional. I definitely see that gap closing. I mean, maybe not to the full extent, but I think many more people are becoming open to this idea, and I think the more they see it, I don't know, it's resonating. It's resonating with a lot of people, even people who are used to like city life. Some people are just tired of it. And they're like, I want to get out of here. I want to move to the woods and have my own spot, and that's that. So it's I just don't see anything stopping this right now. It's just we see so much interest, like it's crazy. It's
hmm
really wild, which I didn't know it'd be like that when we first started this up, but um yeah,
yeah,
I just think it's gonna keep going, like at least this decade. I mean, the rest of the 2020s into next 10 years, I would say.
yeah. And I just had this thought. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I mean, isn't a tiny home essentially a pretty big, what, a one bedroom apartment? But obviously, you're not stuck in a city in a high rise building. You have
Mhm.
land and space. And have you ever thought of it in that way?
Yeah, and I used to live in a condo, and the difference is though is you have that, at least for me, that peace that you don't have the neighbors, you don't have the noise. So it really also, depends on your lifestyle preference. Some people want that city life and just wouldn't be about this, but some people are really looking for that off the grid lifestyle, or at least, um kind of thinking about the idea of it, and they're willing to dive in. So, but yeah, most of our outreach and all of that, it's a lot of inbound contact. And then what typically the process, we would schedule a consultation call, just learn about what you want to do with your projects, whether it's a one home or 10 homes, whatever it is. And then, yeah, we'd make a plan, a proposal, and, really make sure you get the design and build you want, and then go from there.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I kind of want to pivot now too. I'm curious more about like your story and how you and your other co-founder decided to found this, and what made you want to go out on your own and be a founder and an entrepreneur versus working a more traditional corporate path.
Yeah, I did about 10 years of the traditional corporate. I worked at four different banks, and, that has its pros and cons. I definitely enjoyed my time, but it's also very different. I've always wanted to kind of have that entrepreneur path, whether building a company by myself or with other people. And then, yeah, I think it was around 2019, I started working in the Web3 space, Cardano, like crypto projects, NFT projects. Um, I did that in marketing roles for, about 3 years or so. And then, yeah, this opportunity came up, and, part of it was also, we accept digital currency. So that was kind of a tie in. Um, but then, we really honed in on the building and delivery, execution, partnerships, and it's really just blossoming. It's taken off. So we're happy with the progress, but not satisfied. So
And I mean, is there like a specific why as to why you've chosen this path versus staying in banking? Is there a certain part of it? I mean, is it just
uh,
the freedom?
mental
Is it
health
the
is yeah, mental
okay?
health's a big factor. No, it's just and those type of roles, those corporate roles, for me personally, from my experience, they could be stressful, and I like to kind of control my own destiny. I'm not a fan of um, those certain boss types where you have to report up and you're limited in how you can grow each year. You're limited on your whether it's your pay or your role or whatever. That was very much a turnoff from my experience in the corporate world. I'm not saying it's like that for everyone, but I was very determined to kind of break away from that. I don't think I would be too happy if I was still in that position. I mean, I loved everyone I worked with, but just like the actual job itself.
Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, did you have like a point where it was like the final straw, or you're like, okay, I'm out, I'm trying, or was it gradual? Because I think there are like so many people, and maybe people that'll listen to this, that are in that same scenario, but for whatever reason, they stay at the bank and stay in that role, and they say, oh, I don't want to take the step and start something on my own. So like, was there anything in particular that led you to taking the first step?
Yeah. So what happened? I was really into a certain crypto project at the time called Cardano. It's like a top 10 crypto.
Hmm.
Um, I was posting about them all the time on socials. I eventually wanted to work for them, and I got to know everyone kind of in the community. They eventually held an in-person event in Miami while I was still in my bank job. But I traveled down to the event hoping to network and land a role somewhere within that project, and that's what happened. Well, I got brought on as a part-time like social media manager while I was still in my bank job, and eventually I was able to leave full time. However, I did take it was about a 50% pay cut to leave my bank job. So that tells
Mm.
you how much I was kind of determined to make that move. But I was so, honed in and believed in what I was doing that I didn't care about that. It didn't kill the deal for me. I was still going to do it. But it was a
Mm.
tough decision, obviously. But I had to pull the trigger.
And is there any reason why like you took such a big pay cut? Did you just realize like, hey, the value I'm going to get from learning from the team at Cardano and the
Yeah,
upside was just so much higher?
I believed in the project that much. I I disliked my job at that time. I believed in the thesis of the whole space, the Web3 space, and also part of the job I got to travel a lot, which was nice. So it wasn't, the pay was cut, but then also I got to travel. So that was really cool. I got to go to a lot of cities I hadn't been to, go to a lot of events. I was just ready to explore, get out there, and yeah, I don't regret that at all.
And then can you maybe talk about like pivoting, right? So obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not working with or for Cardano anymore, and now you're doing Lumara, Tiny Home, and you said
Yeah.
digital currency is part of it, right? But obviously, you had to like move to the next thing. So like, how did you know, or how did you do that, and was that part of the expectation, or did you kind of think like, hey, I'm going to work for Cardano forever, and this is going to be it, and then it changed.
Yeah, I didn't really know how long it would last, but the crypto NFT markets had so much fluctuations and all of that. So I ended up working for several different projects after Cardano, before Lumara. Whether it was crypto or NFT related, but they were all marketing roles in that Web3 space. And then, yeah, eventually I met Raphael and learned about Lumara and what the mission there was, and I it was an easy call to come on board. And then we really started focusing on this tiny home movement, which I think we we're focused on the right thing.
Hmm. No, it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting how everyone has their own path, right? And I don't know if
Yeah.
you have any advice for someone else out there that, they whether they want to grow in a corporate role or take a chance in entrepreneurship. Like if you look back on your path, your story, like if there were certain things that stand out that were key, what advice would you have for anybody else out there?
Yeah, I think practical advice, if you're in a corporate role, I would maximize your off time at the job. And what I mean by that is, any corporate role, you're probably gonna have time where you can surf the web or whatever at a certain point of the day. Just maximize that time, hone in on your passion, whatever, or what you're trying to do, what's your grand goal, um, build a skill, like learn something. So that was a big thing for me, was maximizing the time I wasn't actually doing my corporate job, but I was at that job. You know what I mean? Um, and and then yeah, if you listening come up to a decision like I had to make, I would say go for it 100% of the time. Um, if you're in a miserable role and you have an opportunity to pivot, even if it's not at the money you want, a lot of times it ends up being better money. So that's not always the end game. It will come eventually if you really believe what you're doing. And then yeah, you really got to be committed. I mean, you can't. You see so many like entrepreneurs who they may start something and then a month later it, you don't hear about it anymore. They
Hmm.
hype it up, build all these pages, whatever, and then it's gone. So really focus, be repetitive, be committed. Um, and then if you have clients, if you're in a business with clients, really treat them with respect, really respect their time, follow up. Like all of that is very important. And, be respectful to your partners as well, because you can see some shady business deals over time and all of that. So the what you give, you get back. You gotta give to get. So I'm a big proponent of that. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
I'm also happy to talk to anyone too if anyone wants to chat.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think that's some good advice. And I liked what you said when, utilize your free time or never think that you're just stuck, right? Like you were stuck in
Yeah,
banking and you said, man, this sucks. And some people may say, oh, there's just no other option for me, which is just so untrue,
yeah,
right? In the age of the internet. And there's just so many resources and so many things for you to learn about and so many people to network with that it's just not the case, right? And you need to realize that.
exactly. And yeah, like I mean, YouTube, it was a very good resource for me. You can just learn so much on YouTube, like your channel, for example.
Hmm.
There's so much out there, so there really isn't an excuse. It's easy to make excuses, but there's just not any.
Yeah, no, I like it, and hey, I wish you the best of luck with what you're building. But I think to close us out here, I'll give you the floor. Any closing thoughts, and then also where can people find you in Lumara?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Connor. I love your podcast. I've seen some of the episodes. You've done a lot, so I need to see all of them. Yeah, anybody watching, if you're an entrepreneur, want to be a founder, co-founder, you are, go get them. Hope you get exactly what you're looking for, but we all got to stay committed to our goals. So that's obvious, but little piece of advice. And if you want interest, or if you have interest in tiny homes themselves or container homes, definitely message us, Instagram or X. We're at Lumara Tiny Homes, all one, all connected. But yeah, DM anytime. And if you want to talk to me or Raphael, whoever, we're there. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Super excited for what you're doing, what we're doing. So hopefully, whoever's watching, you're doing something cool as well.
Right on. Thanks, Zach, and yeah, all your info, your LinkedIn, Lumara socials will be in the description. So, hey, again, appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, let's stay in touch and best of luck.
Absolutely. Thanks, Connor.